In April 1946, a group of German war brides arriving in New Jersey aboard the Queen Mary experienced their first taste of American abundance when their GI husbands take them to a gleaming all-night diner on Route 1. After years of wartime rationing and scarcity, these women are overwhelmed by the endless milkshakes, towering burgers, and neon-lit promise of a country where everything seems possible, even at 2 a.m. But as they navigate this brave new world of chrome counters and jukebox music, they must reconcile their memories of a devastated homeland with the dazzling reality of post-war American prosperity, one unlimited refill at a time. The Queen Mary, a titan of the seas, loomed in the early morning mist of New York Harbor, its immense hull a silhouette against a sky just beginning to shed the last vestiges of night. A chorus of distant horns, mournful and low, mingled with the restless cries of seagulls circling overhead, their calls a sharp contrast to the deeper, anxious murmur of voices emanating from the throng gathered on deck. The air, thick with the damp promise of spring, also carried an undercurrent of profound anticipation, relief, and a pervasive, quiet apprehension. For weeks, these women had journeyed across the vast Atlantic, a fragile cargo of hope and unspoken fears, each breath a testament to survival and a prayer for a new beginning. They were war brides, German women plucked from the wreckage of a continent and set adrift towards an unknown future. Among them stood Elara Schmidt, 28, her slender frame almost swallowed by the heavy, borrowed coat that did little to soothe the chill in her bones. Her eyes, usually keen and observant, were shadowed with a weariness that transcended the journey. She was an architect by training, a dreamer of structures, but her own world had crumbled into dust, her family's home a casualty of the conflict. Her quiet demeanor masked a fragile optimism, one that constantly wrestled with a profound sense of guilt. How could she embrace a future when so many of her own people had none, when her past was a landscape of loss? Her husband, Thomas, a GI, she had met in the waning days of the occupation, was somewhere below, waiting. Their connection was a quiet understanding, forged in shared exhaustion and a mutual desire for peace. Beside Elara, Greta Müller, 32, surveyed the approaching shore with a pragmatic, watchful gaze. Her face, etched with the resilience of a woman who had seen too much, gave little away. A widow of the war, she had learned to survive, to be resourceful, to guard her heart fiercely. Her uniform, a simple serviceable dress provided by the relief agencies, was meticulously pressed, a small act of control in a world that had offered none. Her husband, Frank, was a good-natured, boisterous man, a stark contrast to her own quiet intensity. For Greta, America represented a practical escape, safety, food, stability. Her hopes were grounded in the tangible, but beneath the surface deep scars throbbed, a constant reminder of what it had cost to reach this point. A little apart, Hannah Richter, a mere 22, shivered despite the cool air, but her gaze was fixed on the horizon with an almost childlike wonder. She was the youngest of their small, self-appointed group, outwardly brimming with a fragile hope, though easily overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. Her dreams for America were vivid, a fresh start, a clean slate, a chance to simply be without the gnawing pangs of hunger or the ever-present shadow of loss. David, her sweet, somewhat naive GI husband, had promised her a new life, and she clung to that promise like a lifeline. She imagined a world where simple things, a full meal, a warm bed, a moment of peace, were not luxuries, but ordinary realities. The disembarkation was a bewildering slow-motion ballet of bodies and paperwork. Officials with stern but not unkind faces ushered them through a labyrinth of questioning and medical checks. Each form, each stamp chipped away at their individual identities, reducing them to statistics, to war brides, a collective entity rather than unique women. Yet even in this impersonal process, there were fleeting glimpses of the new world. The American civilians who assisted them seemed impossibly well-fed, their clothes brightly colored, their movements unburdened. The stark contrast to the gaunt, somber faces of their homeland was a physical shock, a vivid illustration of the chasm they had crossed. Eventually, they were reunited with their husbands. Thomas's quiet smile, Frank's booming laugh, David's gentle touch, each a small anchor in the churning sea of strangeness. There was immense relief, a sense of having finally arrived, but also a palpable awkwardness. The familiar faces of their husbands were reassuring, yet they had changed too. They spoke with an easy confidence, an unburdened cheerfulness that, to the wives, felt both welcome and alien. The GIs, eager to please, to show off this wondrous land, seemed largely unaware of the silent battles raging within their wives, the deep-seated guilt and the trauma that lingered like a persistent ghost. From Ellis Island, they were shuttled to Camp Kilmer, a temporary reception center in New Jersey. It was stark, utilitarian, but clean, offering the basic necessities: cot beds, communal dining, a roof over their heads. It was a place of transition, neither home nor truly America. In the crowded barracks, the women clung to each other, a silent sisterhood forged in shared experience. The days were filled with rudimentary English lessons, instructions on American customs, and endless waiting. They watched other war brides, women from England, France, Italy, adapting with varying degrees of success. Some seemed to blossom immediately, others remained withdrawn, their eyes reflecting the same deep-seated unease that Alara felt. As evening descended upon Camp Kilmer, a gray monotony settled over the barracks. The air was heavy with the smell of institutional cooking and disinfectant. Hannah traced patterns on the dusty windowsill, a restless energy buzzing within her. Greta meticulously mended a loose button on her coat, her movements precise and economical. Ilara sat on her cot, attempting to read a tattered German book, but the words blurred before her eyes, her mind far away. Suddenly, their husbands appeared, their faces bright with a shared secret. Thomas, usually reserved, had a nervous excitement about him. Frank, as always, was boisterous, practically vibrating with suppressed energy. David, ever gentle, offered a hopeful, tentative smile. "Ladies," Frank announced, his voice echoing a little too loudly in the quiet barracks, "we're busting you out of this joint for a real American experience." Thomas nodded, a small smile touching his lips. A surprise, something different. David, pulling Hannah close, whispered, "You're going to love it, Schatz." Ilara felt a familiar weariness wash over her. A surprise outing? Her spirit yearned for quiet, for solitude, not forced gaiety. She had been observing the cheerful Americans, their effortless optimism, and it felt like a heavy burden, an expectation she couldn't meet. The thought of feigning enjoyment, of pretending to belong, was exhausting. A pang of guilt, sharp and familiar, pricked her. Was it wrong to even consider seeking pleasure when the memory of bombed-out streets and starving children was so fresh? Greta, ever pragmatic, raised an eyebrow. "Different? What new strangeness awaits us, Frank?" Her tone was dry, but there was a flicker of curiosity in her watchful eyes. She had seen enough strangeness to last a lifetime, but perhaps this American strangeness held the key to a better, more stable future. Hannah, however, was already on her feet, her initial hesitation replaced by a childish excitement. Anything to leave the regimented confines of the camp. "Oh, David, where are we going?" Her voice was light, a sound that rarely escaped her these days. "It's a secret," Thomas declared, a rare playful glint in his eye. "But you'll see." The prospect of going out, even for a short time, brought a small wave of nerves. What would they wear? The clothing they had salvaged from wartime, patched and mended, felt utterly inadequate. They shared a small, communal mirror, adjusting their meager dresses, attempting to coax a semblance of presentability from worn fabric. It was a shared ritual, a quiet moment of female camaraderie, a tiny bubble of normalcy before stepping into the great unknown. Ilara, despite herself, smoothed the front of her simple gray dress, a faint hope stirring within her that this surprise might offer a brief respite from the relentless weight of memory. They were crammed into a borrowed Ford, Thomas at the wheel, the other GIs and their wives wedged together in the back and passenger seats. The engine rumbled to life, a surprisingly smooth sound after the clatter of trains and the hum of the Queen Mary. As they pulled out of Camp Kilmer, the American landscape unfolded before them. It was profoundly, unsettlingly normal. Neat houses, each with a carefully tended lawn, lined the streets. Trees, heavy with the fresh green of spring, rustled gently in the evening breeze. There were no craters, no piles of rubble, no skeletal remains of buildings against the twilight sky. Ilara gazed out the window, a strange mix of relief and profound disorientation swirling within her. The sheer quantity of light was almost overwhelming. Streetlights casting golden pools, porch lights welcoming, store windows ablaze with incandescent glow. After years of blackout conditions, of perpetual dimness and enforced darkness, this extravagant illumination felt garish, almost offensive in its heedless brilliance. She longed for the deep velvet black of the night sky, a sky where she could find familiar constellations. But here, the city glow obscured them, swallowing the stars whole. Greta, ever the pragmatist, assessed the scene with a critical eye. So much wasted electricity, she murmured, more to herself than to Frank, who was busy pointing out a particularly large house. Yet, even as she thought it, a grudging admiration pricked at her. This order, this untouched prosperity, was a stark contrast to the chaos she had known. She took a deep breath, trying to push down the lingering memories of smoke and dust, of broken glass and silent, deserted streets. This was different. This had to be better. Hannah, however, was simply captivated. Her head swiveled from side to side, her eyes wide with a childlike wonder. She saw children playing in yards, heard the faint strains of laughter, observed women chatting easily over fences. It was a world she had only vaguely remembered from before the war, a world of effortless peace. A feeling of hope, tentative and delicate, began to blossom in her chest. This was what David had promised, a fresh start, a future where she could perhaps rediscover the girl she had been, the GI. Oblivious to the complex emotional landscape swirling within their wives, chattered with a proud, eager enthusiasm. "Look, Ilara, isn't that a fine house?" Thomas nodded towards a 2-story home with a wide porch. "Yours will be even bigger one day." Ilara managed a weak smile. The thought of a house, a home, feeling too distant, too abstract. "It is substantial," she replied, the architectural term a small comfort in her confusion. Frank gestured broadly. "And down here, Greta, the main street, all the shops. You can buy anything here, anything you want." Greta simply nodded, her gaze fixed on a brightly lit window display featuring a gleaming new refrigerator, an appliance so alien and luxurious it seemed to belong to another planet. Her mind, still operating on wartime scarcity, struggled to compute the sheer volume of goods. David squeezed Hannah's hand. "See, Hannah? No more shortages. You're gonna love it here, honey. Really, you are." Hannah squeezed back, a silent testament to her burgeoning belief. The simple reassurance, coupled with the dazzling sights, felt like a balm to her war-weary soul. They drove for what felt like a long time, the rhythmic hum of the car a lullaby, the passing scenery a surreal movie playing outside the windows. Just when Ilara thought her senses could absorb no more, a new spectacle emerged from the darkening highway. In the distance, a pulsating beacon of pink light pierced the gloom, a vibrant, almost aggressive splash of color against the pale sky. It grew steadily larger, resolving into a shimmering, glorious sign that spelled out, in looping cursive letters, "All-Night Diner, open 24 HRS." The neon hummed and crackled, a living, buzzing entity. It was an assault, a sensory overload. The wives almost instinctively recoiled, then leaned forward, their eyes mesmerized by the sheer, unadulterated brilliance. For Ilara, it was a symbol of crass excess, loud and unapologetic. For Greta, it sparked an almost clinical curiosity. How did such a thing exist? What purpose did it serve? For Hannah, however, it was pure, unfiltered wonder, a beacon of promise in the foreign night. Frank slapped his knee. "Aha, there it is, the surprise!" Thomas grinned, a genuine, boyish excitement radiating from him. "It's a diner. Best food in America, open all night. And wait till you see the milkshakes." David, his voice soft with anticipation, added, "They have everything, Hannah, everything." Their enthusiasm, while infectious, was also a little jarring. This structure, this temple of endless consumption, felt like something from another world. The name itself, All-Night Diner, seemed to defy logic, to flout the very concept of time and resource. The car pulled into the brightly lit parking lot, crunching gravel under the tires. The clang of the bell above the diner door was like a gunshot in the suddenly quiet night, an abrupt punctuation mark before the assault on their senses truly began. A blast of warmth, almost stifling, hit them first, carrying with it a dizzying, rich aroma of frying bacon, sizzling burgers, sweet syrup, and percolating coffee. It was an overwhelming olfactory symphony, the kind of concentrated, abundant smell that had been absent from their lives for so long. Then came the sounds, the clatter of plates, the murmur of loud chatter, punctuated by bursts of laughter, and the cheerful, upbeat swing music blaring from a jukebox in the corner. Visually, it was a kaleidoscope of gleam and color. Chrome glinted everywhere, on the stool bases, the counter trim, the napkin dispensers. Red vinyl booths beckoned, their pristine surfaces reflecting the fluorescent lights. Gleaming formica tabletops, wiped to a spotless sheen, awaited customers. Waitresses in spotless white uniforms, their faces bright and unburdened, moved with an easy, confident efficiency. But it was the sheer volume of food on display that truly stunned them. Pies stacked high on rotating pedestals, their fruit fillings glistening. Pastries under glass domes, impossibly fluffy and golden. A counter laden with toppings, whipped cream, sprinkles, cherries, nuts, all in what seemed like endless supply. Hannah gasped, a tiny sound swallowed by the din. Her eyes were wide, darting from one impossible sight to another. It was almost too much to take in, like a fantasy brought to life, a dream she hadn't dared to conjure. A dizzying sense of possibility, of a future filled with such simple, glorious abundance surged through her. She felt lightheaded, as if she might float away. Greta's expression tightened, her lips pressed into a thin line. A flicker of disbelief crossed her face, quickly followed by a calculating, assessing gaze. How much food was this? Why was there so much? Her mind, trained by years of rationing, instinctively calculated calories, measured resources, wondered at the sheer, almost criminal waste. This extravagant display, while fascinating, felt deeply unsettling. Ilara clutched Thomas's arm, her knuckles white. Her face had paled and she felt a sudden, suffocating claustrophobia. The noise, the blinding lights, the overwhelming smell, it all pressed in on her, threatening to overwhelm. It felt like a stage, an unreal, almost vulgar performance of plenty. The brightness was relentless, digging into her tired eyes, seeming to mock the darkness she had left behind. She wanted to turn and run, to escape this jarring assault. Their husbands, sensing their wives' paralysis, gently guided them through the bustling aisles. Frank, with a proud sweep of his arm, indicated an empty red vinyl booth against the far wall. "Here we go, ladies, best seat in the house." It was a small island of relative privacy amidst the hubbub, a temporary refuge from the sensory assault. Once settled, the GIs beamed, clearly pleased with their surprise. The waitresses, with their easy smiles and effortless movements, seemed to exist on a different plane. One approached their table, her pencil poised over a small pad. "What can I get for you folks?" Her voice was cheerful, devoid of the world weariness they knew so well. Thomas took charge, his eyes meeting Ilara's with a silent question. He could see her distress, the way she shrank into herself. "Hamburgers for everyone," he announced, choosing something he knew. "Fries, and the best apple pie in the state." Frank, ever the enthusiast, added, "And you absolutely have to try the milkshakes. They have 'em with unlimited refills." He winked conspiratorially at Greta. "That means as many as you can drink, sweetheart." Greta's eyebrows shot up. Unlimited? The word was foreign, almost nonsensical. For so long, every morsel, every sip had been rationed, measured, finite. The concept of unlimited was a stark, almost absurd contrast to rations, scarcity, enough for today. Her mind grappled with the sheer audacity of it. Hannah, however, simply beamed. "Milkshakes," she breathed, the word a soft echo of delight. She remembered a single piece of hard candy from before the war, a luxury she hadn't tasted in years. This surely would be even better. Their first milkshakes arrived, delivered with a flourish by the beaming waitress. They were immense, towering concoctions of creamy, thick liquid, crowned with a generous swirl of whipped cream and a single, perfectly red cherry. A long, striped straw poked out invitingly. Hannah took her first tentative sip. The taste was an explosion on her tongue. Pure, unadulterated sugar, a creamy coldness that coated her mouth. It was a forgotten luxury, a sensation so potent it almost brought tears to her eyes. She closed her eyes, savoring the richness, the sheer extravagance of it all. This was a taste of the promised land. Greta, ever cautious, watched Hannah's reaction before trying her own. The flavor was potent, almost unsettling, so sweet, so rich. Her stomach, long accustomed to leaner fare, felt a strange lurch. It was delicious, yes, but also a potent, almost visceral reminder of how desperately little she had consumed for so long. She looked at the whipped cream, perfectly piped, and saw the hands that had struggled to knead bread from meager flour rations. Ilara, with a deep sense of trepidation, brought the straw to her lips. The cold, sweet liquid hit her, and she felt an immediate wave of nausea. It was too much, too sweet. It felt like a betrayal of all the deprivation, a bitter reminder of the hunger she had endured, the hunger she had seen in the eyes of others. The easy indulgence of it felt wrong, a heavy weight in her stomach. The GIs, meanwhile, had begun to eat their hamburgers with gusto, relishing the familiar taste of home. Thomas, noticing Ilara's pale face, gently nudged her glass. "Try a bit more, Schatz. It's good." Then as the waitress returned to their table, Frank casually dropped a few coins onto the tabletop. A tip. The clink of the money was loud in the silence of Greta's thoughts, a shocking display of disposable income casually given for a service. She remembered the arduous process of bartering for basic necessities back home, the humiliation of trading precious heirlooms for a handful of potatoes. This effortless transaction felt profoundly alien. Around them, the diner buzzed with American patrons. Families laughed, couples chatted, teenagers gossiped in hushed tones. They ate with a casual ease, an unburdened confidence that felt alien, almost jarring. Their laughter, their carefree expressions, struck Ilara as inappropriate, almost cruel. Didn't they know? Didn't they remember? The contrast was stark, a chasm she felt unable to bridge. The jukebox blared on, a relentless stream of upbeat swing music. The catchy melodies, the brassy trumpets, the insistent rhythm. It was so different from the somber folk songs, the haunting melodies, or the harsh military marches that had punctuated their lives in Germany. Hannah, after her initial shock, found herself tapping a foot almost unconsciously to the rhythm. A small smile, hesitant but genuine, flickered across her face. Was it okay to feel this? This lightness, this simple enjoyment? A whisper of guilt tried to intrude, but for a moment the music was louder. Greta watched a mother in a nearby booth try to calm a crying child with a cookie. The gesture, so simple, so natural, struck her deeply. A maternal instinct, long suppressed, stirred within her. She remembered her own desperate efforts to feed herself, to find even the smallest scrap. A profound sense of guilt gnawed at her. How could she possibly enjoy this excess when so many had suffered, when so many children had gone hungry? The casual waste of food, the half-eaten plates, felt like a slap in the face. Ilara's gaze drifted to the other patrons. Their ease, their laughter, grated on her frayed nerves. She saw not the happy faces of strangers, but the gaunt, worried faces of her lost friends, the desperate eyes of children begging for scraps. She heard not the cheerful din of the diner, but the echoing silence after a raid, the mournful cry of ambulance sirens. The gaiety felt inappropriate, almost obscene. She wanted to scream, "Don't you know what we've been through? Don't you know what it costs to have this?" The sheer, unthinking happiness of these people felt like an insult to the memory of her devastated homeland. The hamburger on her plate, once a source of curiosity, now seemed enormous, grotesque. She pushed it away, a sudden wave of nausea rising in her throat. The rich, greasy aroma that had initially been so novel now seemed cloying, sickly sweet. She felt a profound weariness settle over her, an exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue. She grew quiet, her gaze distant, lost in the swirling vortex of past and present. Thomas, sensing her withdrawal, tried to coax her gently. "What's wrong, Schatz? Don't you like it?" His voice was soft, laced with concern, but tinged with a slight confusion. He had wanted this to be a wonderful experience for her. Ilara struggled to articulate the complex, conflicting emotions that threatened to choke her. "It is too much," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the jukebox. "Too much. Everything." The words felt inadequate, hollow. How could she explain the profound cultural dislocation, the jarring contrast between such effortless plenty and the landscape of ruin embedded in her mind? She glanced at Thomas's eager, loving face and saw only his genuine desire for her happiness, a desire that she in her current state seemed incapable of fulfilling. Thomas, though well-meaning, misinterpreted her quiet distress. He saw it as pickiness, perhaps an expression of exhaustion from the journey, or simply a lingering unfamiliarity with American food. "Ah, well, you'll get used to it," he said, a little too brightly, patting her hand. "It's just American food. It's different, but it's good." His words, intended to comfort, only deepened Alara's sense of isolation. Greta, meanwhile, watched a young GI at the next table leave half of his plate, a thick slice of apple pie barely touched. Her eyes narrowed, a familiar anger stirring within her. She leaned towards Frank, her voice low but sharp. Why did he not finish his food? Frank, mid-chew, shrugged. "He's full, honey. There's plenty more where that came from." He gestured vaguely towards the bustling kitchen. Greta's internal struggle intensified. The ingrained scarcity mindset, the deeply etched lesson of waste not, want not, clashed violently with this casual, almost contemptuous discard of sustenance. She wanted to lecture him, to explain the value of every crumb, but she knew it would be futile. The chasm of their experiences was too vast. She bit back her words, a bitter taste in her mouth that had nothing to do with the sweet milkshake. Hannah, who had been reveling in her second milkshake, felt a sudden wave of guilt wash over her. Her stomach, long accustomed to being half empty, now felt distended, almost painfully full. She remembered the gaunt, hungry faces from the bread lines, the image of her mother, thin and weary, carefully portioning out meager rations. How could she be so selfish, indulging in this endless sweetness, when those memories were so fresh? The joyous bubble of wonder began to deflate, replaced by a prickling shame. The GIs, though loving and genuinely well-intentioned, couldn't possibly comprehend the depth of their wives' recent experiences. They saw gratitude or expected it, but they were largely unaware of the psychological scars that ran deep, the trauma that continued to shape every perception. They wanted to provide comfort, a safe new beginning, but they were missing the fundamental language of their wives' suffering. They offered platitudes, promises of a brighter future, oblivious to the ghosts that still haunted the present. A growing sense of isolation began to settle over the wives. They felt a profound disconnect, a sense that their past, their suffering, was a burden no one truly understood, a narrative too dark for this brightly lit new world. They were expected to be grateful, to be happy, to forget. But how could they forget? The memories clung to them like persistent shadows, even in the garish glow of the diner. Just as the silence at their table threatened to become unbearable, a small, unexpected incident broke the tension. David, Hannah's husband, caught sight of a young couple at the counter twirling and jiving to a particularly upbeat swing number on the jukebox. With a mischievous grin, he suddenly stood, extended a hand to Hannah, and with a surprisingly clumsy bow declared, "Come on, Schatz, let's show them how it's done." He promptly tripped over his own feet, stumbled, and nearly sent a tray of empty glasses clattering to the floor. Hannah giggled, a pure, unforced sound that escaped her lips before she could suppress it. It was a genuine, spontaneous outburst, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in years, and it surprised even her. David, flushed but laughing, quickly righted himself, and the waitress who had caught the tray simply smiled kindly. It was a tiny, absurd moment, a flicker of light against the overwhelming gloom. Greta, who had been watching the scene unfold with her usual watchful intensity, felt a faint smile touch her own lips. She watched Hannah, so young, so eager, finding joy in such a simple, silly thing, a flicker of something akin to warmth. A memory of a time when laughter was easy stirred within her. Perhaps this place, for all its bewildering excess, truly did offer a chance for simple joys, especially for the young. Perhaps a new generation could be spared the harsh realities of her own. Even Alara, who had been shrinking further into herself, felt a brief softening. She watched Thomas, his face alight with pride as he watched David and Hannah. She saw his hope, his genuine desire to provide, his earnest efforts to make her happy. She saw his love, quiet and steadfast. A moment of tenderness, gentle and unexpected, passed between them as Thomas discreetly reached for her hand under the table, his fingers intertwining with hers. His touch was a small anchor, a connection in the swirling chaos. The milkshake, which had initially been a jarring symbol of excess, now began to transform, subtly, into something more complex. It was no longer just a cold, sweet drink. It was a potent metaphor. For Hannah, it had become a symbol of limitless possibility, of a forgotten childhood rediscovered. Each sip was a taste of freedom, a promise of a future where simple pleasures were abundant. For Greta, it remained a symbol of bewildering abundance, a thing to be approached with caution, to be understood, but also, crucially, to be utilized for survival. This country, with its endless supply of milkshakes, offered a different kind of power, a power she was determined to understand and harness. For Ilara, the milkshake remained a potent, almost painful symbol of the vast, almost grotesque disparity between her two lives, the one she had left behind and the one she was attempting to inhabit. Yet in Thomas's quiet gaze, in Hannah's unexpected laughter, in the very presence of this baffling, dazzling place, she felt a subtle shift. It was a challenge, yes, a challenge to adapt, to reconcile, to find meaning in this new, overwhelming context. The raw wound of memory was still there, but perhaps, just perhaps, in the warmth of new, however bewildering experiences, it could begin to heal. The concept of refill was still astonishing. The second, then the third, milkshake. It wasn't just the quantity, but the ease of acquiring it. No struggle, no negotiation, no pleading, just a simple request, a casual nod. It was a profound, silent lesson in a new kind of power, a new kind of privilege. A privilege they were only just beginning to comprehend. Slowly, tentatively, the wives began to observe the other patrons with a new kind of awareness. They listened more carefully to the strange, lilting cadences of American English, picking out familiar words, beginning to grasp the nuances. A glimmer of a new identity, a nascent understanding began to form. This was their new reality. They could not change the past, but they had to find a way to live in this bewildering, vibrant present. The neon sign, which had initially seemed harsh and garish, now felt less hostile, less threatening. It signified continuity, a world that, despite all the devastation they had witnessed, simply kept going, stubbornly, brightly, regardless of war. Eventually, full and slightly dazed by the sheer volume of sights, sounds, and flavors, the group prepared to leave. The neon sign glowed just as brightly behind them, its pink hue a cheerful, defiant beacon in the night. As they stepped out, the chill of the night air felt different now, no longer biting like the German winter, but rather like a cleansing, refreshing breeze. The overwhelming sensations from inside the diner began to settle, coalescing into lingering impressions, powerful and indelible. The taste of sugar still lingered on their tongues, a ghostly sweetness that contrasted sharply with the bitter flavors of memory. The lingering smell of fried food, of coffee and syrup, clung to their clothes, a strange new perfume. The rhythm of the jukebox music subtly played on in their minds, an insistent, upbeat counterpoint to the somber melodies of their past. The visual of the endless parade of food, the towering pies, the glistening pastries, the bottomless milkshakes. It was a stark, almost unbelievable image that would stay with them, a constant reminder of the world they had entered. On the drive back to Camp Kilmer, the car was quieter, the GIs content and satiated, the wives lost in their own complex thoughts. Hannah, nestled beside David, drifted off to sleep, a faint, contented smile playing on her lips. Her dreams, no doubt, were now tinged with the vibrant, shocking colors of America, with the taste of sweet milkshakes and the sound of upbeat swing. A brightly lit future, perhaps, full of endless possibilities. Greta gazed out the window, her mind still pragmatic, still assessing. She saw the challenges ahead with a clear, unwavering eye, learning the language, truly understanding this bewildering culture, building a new home, creating a stable life for herself and Frank. But beneath the pragmatism, a small seed of hope had been planted. This country, for all its oddities, for all its strange, almost excessive abundance, offered a secure future. A future free from the gnawing fear of scarcity. A future where her hard-won survival skills could finally be put to a different, gentler use. Ilara remained awake, her eyes fixed on the retreating neon glow in the rearview mirror. Her thoughts were still complex, still swirling with a profound sense of cultural displacement. The overwhelming contrast between the diner's opulent glow and the ruined landscape of her memories still pained her, a raw, aching wound. But in that pain, a flicker of curiosity, a nascent sense of wonder, had been ignited. What else did this all-night diner country hold? Could she, an architect of broken dreams, find a place here without betraying the memory of her past, without forgetting all that she had lost? The journey had just begun. The raw wound of memory was still there, but perhaps, just perhaps, in the bewildering warmth of new experiences, it could eventually begin to heal. As they pulled back into Camp Kilmer, the first soft light of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in gentle hues of rose and lavender. The darkness of their past night, both literal and metaphorical, gave way to a new day. The neon light, once a jarring shock, now seemed to illuminate a path forward, however uncertain. The diner had been more than just a meal. It was a profound cultural initiation, a moment where the past and future had clashed with overwhelming force. And in that clash, the long, complicated, and utterly bewildering journey of becoming American had truly, irrevocably begun. They were here now, irrevocably linked to this new, vibrant, bewildering world. If you found this journey as compelling as we did, please consider subscribing to our channel for more untold stories. Don't forget to hit the like button if this narrative resonated with you, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you.